What we assume, I think, is the brand is like what's above the surface, what we see: logos, colors, fonts, the visuals, the website, that type of thing. And I think this is where most people go wrong because they just don't know what they don't know. And I saw in my own clients that they weren't successful. They had everything they needed, but they were afraid to launch, or they've been getting incredible results, doubling income.
And you actually need an identity shift to step into the fullness of what you're called to do and the potential that you have here. Do you really need a brand, right? In this age of AI and information overload and direct response marketing and lead generation, all this stuff that's supposed to be so measurable, do we really need a brand to grow our businesses? I have Tiffany Neuman, who's going to have a very impassioned response to that question. And she's a close friend of mine. It's someone I met at PodFest last year. And we have some mutual friends in the coaching industry. We've done some promotions of each other's stuff because, spoiler alert, I do believe you should have a brand. And I think brand is super important. But I'm going to let Tiffany convince us and share her story about why this means so much to her. So Tiffany, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I'm super grateful. And I'd love to just turn the mic over to you for a few minutes and let you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about how you got into your legacy brand and all the cool work that you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, Dustin. It's an honor and a pleasure. And having a podcast of my own, I can say the same thing as some people are like, oh, podcasting, I don't know about that. And I'm like, no, you have to have a podcast. So yeah, I started out in the branding world over 20 years ago. I went to school for branding. I worked in the corporate world with brands like Burt's Bees, Adidas, Chase Bank, Stoli Vodka, a lot of big brands for over 15 years out of Chicago in a marketing company. And that was my dream job. That's what I wanted to do. I became a professor of design and branding at a college, like all the things. And then I had a child. And I think a lot of us know that shifts a lot of things in our lives. And I was just going to Chicago every other week and being away from my daughter. And I'm like, nope, this is not me. And I didn't realize at the time too, I was very much an entrepreneur in the corporate world. I built a whole department in the branding area and all the things. I won't get into the details. And so I realized, oh, I'm actually an entrepreneur at heart. I couldn't help myself. I was always building new things and reinventing and things. So it was an easy transition into my business. And now I help thought leaders. So authors, speakers, podcasters, mostly online business owners in some way, create their brands. And so in response to, do you need a brand? I actually believe, of course, I'm partial, but I believe it's more important than ever because we're seeing AI avatars out there that look human. And so I like to say being imperfectly perfect is actually the most important thing. And having a personal brand where your true essence, your humanity shines through is so needed right now. Because we show up on my podcast, I really don't edit anymore. And that's part of my brand because it shows that I say, and I mess up sometimes. And like an AI podcaster or avatar isn't going to necessarily do that. So anyways, that's one of the core reasons, but we can definitely get into more. And even what I truly think a brand is, a lot of people think it's the visuals and your logo. And yes, that's a piece of it, but there's so much more that's actually your brand, like the way that you're showing up, the way that you're talking, and all of those pieces.
I love it. Yeah. And we're going to dive deep into that. And yeah, even how I rambled through the intro and screwed it up. That's just totally on brand. I did that on purpose. So it's just, yeah. So I'm not AI because AI would be much more perfect. I do want to definitely get your perspective on what is brand, what are the elements that are super vital for the people that we serve. And we serve a very common market, which is actually the first thing I want to pick your brain a little bit on. When I go to your website, one of the things that jumped off the page at me was that you work with mission-driven entrepreneurs. And I think the reason that jumped out at me is it's the tagline of my own website. And so I'd love your perspective before we get into branding and the actual work that you do in the market selection and the people that you love to work with. Why mission-driven entrepreneurs? What does that mean to you and why is that important to you?
I love that. Well, a few things. Why I chose that is just because I'm mission-driven myself and the business name is Your Legacy Brand. So I feel like yes, of course, we're all in it to make income and to support our families and to give back obviously, but also we're here to, I believe, create change. And by having a podcast, by having a book, you're literally leaving a legacy behind in your thoughts, in your trainings, and things like that. That's going to survive longer than we will as a human, right? So for me, it's really important to work with people who have a big mission and who, like I talk about, making your message a movement, who want to make an actual movement with their work, not just like, oh, I'm going to sell this thing and make some money. And so that's the biggest thing. And one way that I'm very different from a lot of brand experts out there is, yes, everybody says that the riches are in the niches. And yes, I do believe that to some effect, but sometimes I actually have helped certain clients reverse niche, I call it, because they've gotten so narrow that then they get bored of it, or they eventually do kind of run out of clients. And so I really like to help my clients and myself focus more on psychographics over demographics. So instead of the who, I have like thought leader expert brands. Well, that covers a lot of ground. I can work with a lot of different people, but the differentiator or the common golden thread is the mission driven. And so by looking at that, it's going to weed out the bro marketers and the Becky marketers and the early 2020s and earlier, those types of things. Just, that's not my jam. If you're standing in front of a Lambo and being like, I'm so cool of making, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to judge, but those aren't the people I want to work with. I want to work with the people who are truly making a difference.
Same. Yeah, I think that's why we met through a mutual friend, Danielle Weil. But I think I remember, like, from the moment meeting you outside of a conference hall in Podfest, and I don't know, we first started talking about, she's my people. Like, you get it. We just have a heart for serving people in a certain way and serving certain types of people who are trying to make a bigger impact with the God-given abilities and gifts and things that they're stewarding, I guess you could say. And so I think it's a great segue into your thoughts on what branding means, because even in the way you just expressed that, your brand, and the legacy brands that help other people create, I'm guilty of thinking, oh, brand, that's sort of this soft thing. It's sort of this, it's very visual and design. I kind of put things in the branding bucket versus the marketing or the messaging or the copywriting bucket. I understand. I'd love to hear you articulate this. When you say brand, the words are a core part of it, right? And the mission-driven entrepreneur is part of your brand, and it's not part of an image necessarily or a visual that maybe other people associate with quote-unquote branding. So yeah, I just kind of throw you a softball. What is branding? I know, a really, really big question as someone who's taught it in college and everything else, but in an entrepreneurial online business with mission-driven entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, thought leaders, for this specific bucket of people that we love to serve, how should we be thinking of branding as a term? And then we'll get into how do we actually create one and love it and have it fuel our efforts.
Oh, good. Yeah. Thank you for asking that. So typically, like when I'm teaching that, the iceberg analogy that people use for a lot of different things, well, it applies to this question too, as far as most people, like you're saying, and it's nobody's fault. It's just what we assume, I think, is the brand is like what's above the surface, what we see, logos, colors, fonts, the visuals, the website, that type of thing. And that is part of the brand. But if we look below the surface, it's all the things that creates the structure in a brand. And I think this is where most people go wrong because they just don't know what they don't know. Like I always like to say, we fly the plane as we build it. In entrepreneurship, we're like, oh, I'll grab a logo here and I'll like figure this messaging out over here. And so really, I believe that our core message, our core frameworks that we're developing, all of our IP, even the name of the business, like our title, all of those things are part of what I call the brand foundation, like underneath the surface. So like, what is your signature framework? What are the name of your offers? Are they all tied together? All of those things. And that's really setting, like the brand sets the stage and it really positions you as a thought leader, as the speaker, as the expert. And that's why so many people rise to the top and others don't necessarily, is because it's so tight and it's such a branded package that they get known for. And then like you said, the marketing and everything, like your marketing is going to be so much better if you have that solid foundation, because then, okay, I know exactly what I'm saying. I know exactly what I'm putting out there. And then the visuals really are the icing on the cake. It makes that packaging look good because we are visual creatures. And so if you go to somebody's website and it's like a 90s looking website, you're like, oh, I don't know if I can really trust that person, right? Or if it looks like their neighbor's kid did it or something. Especially in this age, unfortunately, we try to say don't judge a book by its cover. That's what I tell my daughters. But at the same time, if you don't look the part, walk the walk, talk the talk, in this age especially, it's hard. Like we're in a trust recession right now. And if you're not doing these things and showing up as the thought leader you are, unfortunately, it holds you back.
So if I'm thinking of your ideal clients and a thought leader comes to you, and I know I would be in this bucket, especially I'm still in this bucket to some extent, but especially a couple of years ago, whereas I don't really know even the questions to ask. Okay, I know I can help people in a deep way on this one topic, and I coach people and people pay me good money. But you're the expert on branding, right? So in a scenario where let's say someone's a niche expert and they really are hyper focused, let's say it's podcast guesting, and they've been doing stuff that people, I want your help with this, and they're really good at helping, but they just don't know where to even kind of start. Can you walk us through it, whether it's a framework or just the normal process for an ideal client of how do we go from someone who's got something really valuable to share with the world, but actually creating a cohesive brand around it? I know that's a loaded question and we could talk for hours, but in your short form, what all do we need to take into consideration in our branding if we're a niche expert and thought leader?
Yeah, I love that. And this works whether you're a niche expert or not. Now, the nice thing is if you're a niche expert like yourself, for instance, I'm working with a tennis coach right now. So he's one of the ones who isn't necessarily, I mean, he is going to have an online course, but he's been on the court up until now. And now he's teaching other tennis coaches how to become a coach instead of working at the YMCA or something, right? So he comes up, I'm like, that's very niche. And so it's even as much as where are you going to get these clients? We're told blaster, spray and pray on Instagram and Facebook. And he's like, I've tried that for 2 years and it's not working. And I'm like, well, that's because your niche they might be there, but if you're just spraying and praying, how do you actually getting to them? So that's a little bit later. We talk about how to get out into the market, utilizing the brand. But the first thing to think about is it always comes down to like your vision. And I know this is like, oh, everybody says this about everything. I like to ask clients, where do you want to be 3, 5, or 10 years from now? And then we reverse engineer it so you are building a brand for that place. Because most often people build it for where they're at now. And if they're just like, I have an idea and I'm kind of new, they're not going to present themselves as the expert they truly are. And so with the branding, we want to position you for where you want to be, and you'll actually grow and evolve into that brand so much faster. So one quick example, my client Elizabeth, she had a decent brand already. Like I do a lot of rebrands too. Like, so people hit a certain level and they're like, oh, I got to go big or go home. So whether you're new or you're experienced and need to go to the next level. So she did have a business, but she was talking only to health coaches, or she was health coaching basically. And she was like, no, I don't really want to do that anymore. I actually want to coach other people to be coaches type of thing. And she was brilliant at it, and she wanted to talk more about leadership. Long story short, when we created her vision, she really wanted to work. Oh my gosh, now I can't think of his name. I have his books even. Oh no, I can't think of his name at the last second. Anyways, this really big thought leader, it'll probably come to me in 5 minutes. And I'll be like, Dustin, I remembered. Anyways, doesn't really matter. But she wanted to have him as a client and work with his audience, and just had this huge vision of where she wanted to take the company. He's a leadership guy. So we renamed her company Luminary Leadership, really positioning her for that, to talk to his audience, restructured it. And within 2 years, now, of course, you can't guarantee these things will happen, but she was at an event, randomly was introduced to him, working with him. She's actually training his team. Like, you can't make this stuff up. It was so beautiful. So that's really what I like to look at, is where do you want to go? And then creating that packaging. So especially if you're starting from scratch, or if you have a brand, it's like, what needs to go? What needs to stay? How do we repackage it? What's the messaging? What are the visuals? Do you need a new website? And looking at everything as a whole big ecosystem, basically.
I love that. Yeah. And I think key there is it's driven by the thought leader's vision. It's driven by strategy, right? In this case, the thing that really helps steer the ship is there's this one sort of, we have the dream 100 of 100 people that we'd love to have in our network or to connect with. She has the dream one, and she's like, it may never happen, but I want to set this up so that this one amazing thought leader would want to work with me. And that gives you, as her consultant and her coach and strategist, clear direction. It's a strategically decided focus and direction. And then you said messaging, so the words really matter and the visuals do matter. So I don't want to degrade that or dismiss that, but it's last, right? It's okay, first we get the vision and the strategy of who we're trying to serve and what we want to do for them, what we stand for, what do we stand against.
Right. Clear on the ideal client, all of those things. We do market research, right? And so that was a great example of one person and where she wanted to go. But say, for instance, a lot of your audience probably is, okay, I want to be on the top 10% of podcasters or whatever. So what is that goal? Is it a podcast first? Is you focused on that? Or are you focused more on your offers? And that strategy changes everything, because a lot of people are not focusing on that end goal. Well, how are you going to get there if you're not focused on it, right?
Yeah, I heard in a book I was just reading, but it was Lewis Howes, as a lot of people know that name now. I've known him for years and years and years when he was doing $97 webinar courses and stuff, right? But he got to this inflection point where he had so much stuff going on. And I don't know if he would use the word rebrand, but the thing that resonated with me in the story, it was actually peeling away. There's so many things that he was doing at once that it was, what am I optimizing for, was the key question, right? And then I think it popped into my head because what you just said, it's the podcast. That's the thing that's going to drive everything else. And so he cut away a lot of great offers and income and said the podcast is it. And then that went from, let's call it 1 million downloads to 50 million downloads. It was, I forget the actual numbers. And then that was a reinvention of his brand, right? Because now he's one of the world's top podcasters. He was a great podcaster, but he wasn't world class because it wasn't the primary focus. And he got to choose that. And in his case, for this chapter, that's what he wanted. And so I kind of envisioned this process that you work with people in at different scales, but it's having the freedom and the autonomy and the agency to get to choose who am I in the business marketplace in the next chapter. And that's super exciting. I'm sure that gets you excited when someone has a question or a statement like that, because then you get to reinvent them, not as a human, but we all get to highlight different parts of our story and expertise in the way that attracts the people that we want to work with, right?
Absolutely. That was such a good example, because that's really what it's about. And you will reinvent over time too. And that's why I like to call it your legacy brand, and why I like to look at that final vision, because you need to plan for that evolution and those shifts over time. And you may need to maybe refresh your brand, but once you set it at the beginning and it's done well, it's not like you're upheaving it and changing all the time, because that actually confuses your audience. Like, you want to stay in your lane, and yes, have those pivots, have those changes, because we all will, but be known for something and kind of stay in that lane on some level.
I knew you were going to. I was waiting.
I knew it was going to catch up with me. I don't know why I blanked on that. John Maxwell was the leader. Of course, everybody knows who John Maxwell is.
I was literally going to guess that, but then I didn't want to be wrong. That's so funny. So yeah, so John Maxwell, so he's the leadership author, the leadership guy.
Exactly. And I was like, why can't I remember that? So funny. Anyways.
Oh, that's awesome. That's such a cool, I'm glad, especially since you remembered the specific name, but such a cool culminating moment that 2 years prior, she had this very conscious focus. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know I want a brand that would enable me to attract John Maxwell as a client. And then it actually happens, because that's how the world works, right? We set this intention and we build towards it. So that's awesome. We're going to get into quite a bit of future pacing, I think, in the second part of this interview. We're talking about where's branding going, and AI and technology.
I love that stuff. Yes.
As we sit here today, and yourlegacybrand.com, the main business that you're running, to the extent you're comfortable sharing sort of a snapshot of your business. I know you have a podcast, but yeah, sort of like the offers. We've already talked about your ideal client, but sort of what's the offer stack? How's the podcast fit in? Anything you want to share as far as team and stuff that people listening to the show just love to see behind the scenes. How's Tiffany doing business?
How business are structured. I love that question. Yeah. So it started out, I left corporate and I was like, I have this big team. I just don't want a team anymore. And so I was kind of solo doing the thing. And then I quickly found out, okay, that's not going to work, because I'm not going to create all these brands and actually build the websites and things. So I do have a small boutique agency with 4 people in it, where we actually create the graphics, create the brands, work on the messaging and things like that. And they support me. So that's part of it when we're actually doing the building. And then I have a Done With You program that I've been running for 5 years called Legacy Brand Foundations. And that really helps people come through and, like I said, create that whole brand foundation. What is my signature framework? How am I going to talk to the people? And what you get from that, I also do this work one-on-one with a handful of people over about a month period. So kind of those two lanes. They could choose either way.
We're done with, or the Legacy Brand Foundations is a group program?
Yeah, it's a group program done with you. So I don't let it's not just a course where they have to go on their own, because people always have too many questions, right? We have a hard time being an objective view. So there's that, or I do that work one-on-one. And basically that gets everything into what we call a brand manual. It's like a 20 to 30 page document that literally gets you clear on your vision, your values, your voice, your brand story. What personal stories are you going to speak from stage? What are your offers stack? And some people, like I said, they have a lot of those things, but they're pivoting on some level. So or they've just never done the work to really get it clear. And they're always kind of scrambling. So we get that all locked in during that process. And then typically people, and that's a lifetime program, so people stay in it. They can come every month and continue to ask questions, or if they kind of shift and change. And then we move into the agency piece of like, okay, now I have the messaging, let's do the visuals and the website. And then the last piece is I do yearly in-person events where I help people craft their signature talks. So that's been a lot of fun, because usually once people have the thought leadership brand, they want to get it out into the world more through speaking. And a lot of people use those talk frameworks to come up with their speaking topics on podcasts, things like that. And then last, I also have a program called Brand Alchemy, because what I noticed with clients is you can have the best messaging, you can have the best strategy for your marketing, strategy for your podcast, all of those things. But if you aren't, and this sounds a little woo, but it's really not, it's scientific. If you're not aligned energetically, if you're in scarcity mode and you're worried and all of those things, especially this day and age when there's a lot of scarcity in the news and everywhere else, like it's just not going to be successful. So I do the mindset piece in that work, because I truly believe that's the missing link that a lot of people don't have. And I saw in my own clients that they weren't successful. They had everything they needed, but they were afraid to launch, or they were afraid to do the thing or whatever. So helping people past that. And so the podcast fits in, just to wrap everything up, really as my gateway into the community. I believe in being social media optional. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram.
Same here. Yes. All right.
Yes. Maybe that's why I felt the same way about you too when we connected. I'm like, yes, he's one of my people.
How can we connect? You're not on Instagram. Hey, me neither. Not on Facebook. Me neither. Yeah, this is great. So I am too.
I am on LinkedIn now, because I do believe, okay, you got to be somewhere, and that's where my people are. I could be, my team's trying to talk to me into YouTube, because like that does go hand in hand with the podcast currently. I've done really well with just the podcast without YouTube. So really that's how people get to know me, is they listen to the podcast, and that then feeds into the brand. And then I also speak in other people's communities and things like that. But the podcast really is my number one initial, I guess you could say, lead magnet without it being a lead magnet, right?
I love that. So offer stack wise makes a ton of sense. So you've got the Legacy Brand Foundations, which is done with you, mostly in a group. There's an option to go one-on-one, I guess, if people want faster results and just more personal attention.
Right. Yeah, I do. The one-on-one's kind of like in a VIP day intensive.
This is awesome. I've got the manual, the messaging. I've got all this clarity about who I am and who I'm serving and where I'm going. And then some of those people are like, and I need a website, and I need visuals, and I need marketing materials. And so you guys have an boutique agency that can go do for you some of those deliverables that build off the brand foundation. And then you've got the in-person. Now that you say it, I remember when we met at Podfest, you just come away from hosting one of these in-person signature talk events. So I'm personally curious, because I think the audience loves unique offers. I'd love to know a little bit about that. And I got to know more about the brand alchemy, because that really caught my eye. So how do the signature talk events, how are those kind of structured? And then let's talk more about brand alchemy. We'll talk a little bit about your marketing strategy with the podcast and partnership stuff you do. And then we'll close out talking about what's next, not only for you, but for branding in this new age that we're in. But yeah, anyway, signature talk in-person events, what's that look like?
All shifting. Yeah. So Signature Talk is a curated, fairly small event. You usually have just 12 people. And so we gather in, we were doing it in Orlando that time. And it's basically taking the stage in an intimate way. So before we have the event, I help you craft your signature talk. I have a framework that I've taught for a while now, literally has people running to the back of the room when I speak in this specific way, in this specific framework. So it's not like a TEDx style where you're inspiring people. I mean, it is inspirational, but it's meant to convert. And so we practice that. And then the actual event is practicing, but it's not like I'm going to be on stage in front of this massive audience for your first time. It's 10 other thought leaders that can give you honest and sincere feedback. So by the time you leave, you're like, I have this thing nailed down. And then the last day, we actually have a hair and makeup done. If mostly if you're a woman, videographer come in, that type of thing, a photographer come in. So you actually have an asset that you walk away with that you can like have a speaker reel or put on your page. And so for people that are wanting to get into speaking on a higher level, but just haven't mastered their talk and really don't have those assets yet, it's just kind of like a one done, let's come in, get it done for a reasonable investment that just adds that extra expertise into your brand, basically.
It's got my wheels turning about the podcast guesting version of this and some of the work that I do on the marketing side. That'd be really cool. But so I love that. That's really a fun offer that is very complementary to the other work that you do. And I assume people can come to just that, but then that might lead them into actually need more deep foundation work, or people that have been working with you on the foundation and done for you. And they're like, now I want to take all this amazing stuff and get on stages, and you're like, yeah, come in person. We can spend a lot more time together, have fun, couple days, and get to practice the craft live. That's a really unique value proposition in an age where everything's mostly digital, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so fun. I love doing it.
That's cool.
Even though I'm not up there speaking, I'm just introducing everybody. But
so then tell us just a little bit about brand alchemy. You mentioned it's getting aligned energetically, which yes, I'm also not woo-woo at all, but I totally believe in this because it's just true. And mindset work, that's a lot of the work that I've done. Mindset and identity work is a lot of the work I've done that's really unlocked new levels of fun, enthusiasm, growth, all the stuff in our business. So how does that work?
Yes, I love that you said identity work too, because I didn't say that, but you nailed it, because it is identity work. A lot of the times we almost have identity crisis. We're parents, we're this, we're that, and we're like, who am I really at this point in my life? I don't know. So that's part of it. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us, most entrepreneurs realize that it's the biggest like personal development thing you can sign up for is business, right? There's so much to go through. And I was naive and didn't really know that when I signed up. And I think all of us have done some sort of work on some level. But I feel it's really the visibility piece. The visibility, sometimes it's the self-worth, sometimes it's money blocks. It's different for different people. For me, it was kind of all of the above. I grew up like not in super scarcity, but we didn't have a lot of wealth. I was afraid to ask for ketchup packets. Like I was so shy.
Oh man, I relate to that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so I did a lot of the work myself. I've been doing it since my 20s. I actually spoke on stage with Mary Morrissey, who was a mentor of mine for a long time. So that's part of it. But also I saw so many blocks in my clients. Like I said, they'd have all the things and they'd be afraid to actually ship it, or they'd hide and they were afraid of being visible. So I actually went and got trained in a lot of different modalities, life coaching, NLP, which sometimes has bad connotation. So I call it conscious NLP because it's an amazing craft. Some people use it for manipulation tactics.
I was going to say, you can trick people with it, but that's not the intent here. Yeah.
No, it actually works well if you, like same thing with money. You can do really amazing things with it and you can do really harmful things with it. But so on this kind of quest for myself, but I also saw it in so many of my clients holding themselves back. And oftentimes there's people who are really good at marketing and they're not true experts and they are manipulating people. And then there's a lot of amazing true experts that are hiding behind the scenes. And it's only because most of the time, the people who are true experts have the most doubt in themselves. And I experienced that. Like, who am I really? The imposter syndrome. And here I am. I've been called one of the top experts by top thought leaders. And then I'm still like, oh, am I really? So anyways, doing that work myself, speaking on stages, my brother makes fun of me now. He's like, how are you speaking on stages? This is so weird. Like, this stuff works. And I just want to help people get out there. And I'm having one of the best years in business. I know you and I talked beforehand and you're doing really well too. And I believe, yes, you have to have the brand. Yes, you have to have the podcast and the strategies. But again, if you don't have these other pieces, it's not it's not going to work as well as it could.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I'm glad that you've stepped into that, and you're your own best case study, and you have to work on your brother at some point so he can see his own potential. And no, that's awesome. I love that. So that's a really cool additional offer that, again, it's part of the same flywheel. It's maybe not the most obvious thing. People, I need branding help. Yes, and you actually need an identity shift to step into the fullness of what you're called to do and the potential that you have here. So I love that.
Can I add one more thing quick, just based on what you said, is when I tell this to my clients all the time too, it goes back to like, give them what they want, not what they need. So it was me paying attention of like, oh, the next step is a lot of the people want to speak. Oh, they're not getting results. Well, they need to break through. And the brand alchemy is a little bit of like, most people don't realize they need it.
What's the modality for delivery? Is this one-on-one work? Is it a workshop? Or how do you do this? Because it seems difficult to transform.
Yeah. So it's actually, I've been doing with my one-on-one clients behind the scenes and they've been getting incredible results, doubling income, best years ever. So I'm like, okay, this stuff works. So it's actually a beta group program now. It starts, well, at the time of this recording, it depends on when it comes out, in October, a 6-week group program. And then I'm kind of toying with the idea, it would be amazing in person. It's just having the capacity myself and for everybody else to travel. So I really want it to be an in-person event someday, but we'll see.
Maybe it could be an add-on before or after the...
Or a hybrid or something. Yeah.
That's awesome. Let's talk just for a second about marketing, because we have to, because that's what people love, marketing. You mentioned your podcast sounds like it's the center of your marketing strategy. And then you mentioned training in other people's groups, partnerships, as we might call it. Anything else, or anything you want to double click on with those two strategies that you think the audience would benefit from hearing from your experience with this stuff?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is one space. You're the expert in the podcasting space, but I think my intention was always like, I love how your Lewis Howes example, and he's like, podcast number one. I could probably do a better job at doubling down on that, to be completely transparent. But for me, I was looking at more as a nurturing tool so people can get to know me and know my brand. Like, if I'm not the top podcaster, I'm okay with that. I really just wanted it to be a space where I could position myself and have my own thought leadership and easy play. Like, I'm a verbal processor. I'm not necessarily a writer. So strategy there is I take my podcast, I transcribe it. It goes through AI, which I've trained on my voice. I do that for clients too. And then, of course, there's some tweaking, but I get all my emails, my LinkedIn content, all comes from me talking things out on the podcast. So it's been so awesome because I could automate my systems way better than they used to be. And so that's really the strategy and the thought process there. And then, yeah, I do a lot of talking to other people's communities, podcast swaps, sometimes workshop swaps. That's what always worked for me. And you just hear so many people talking about other strategies. And I always was like, oh, I should run ads or do these things. And I'm like, no, let's double down on what's working and building actual real human relationships that with people that I'm aligned with, and it becomes a win-win for everybody involved. And since I've been doing that, it's really what works for me. And that's just finding those right people. And I'm going to stick with that.
Good. That's obviously my jam too. And you and I have done some small scale workshop swaps. I've been on your show. You're obviously here guesting. And so we're doing the thing that we both profess and keep at the center of our strategy. And yeah, I'm right with you. I mean, pretty much down the line, it's podcasting, podcast guesting, partnerships. We'll do some LinkedIn because LinkedIn's a good platform for thought leadership. I'm also a verbal processor. I love to speak first and then let other content as needed sort of flow from that. So I love all that, and that's awesome. So I think for the rest of the interview here, I want to transition in a general sense. When people are sitting here listening to this, and branding, my own voice, you can't even have those two thoughts without thinking of AI. And you just said it. How do I get my own voice out? And then how do I make it something I can distribute that's still authentic to me? And there's a lot of these weird dynamics right now with AI and effectively identity cloning. And there's different platforms that are always emerging in different modalities and stuff that. And I know, because we talked even before we started recording, that this is very top of mind for you. You're really going deep in this world. And so I'd love to get your thoughts in general about the intersection of branding and AI and authenticity and technology sort of in general, but then we can talk more about how you're applying that in sort of this next frontier of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said earlier, feel like I could talk for 5 hours about this specifically, but I'll tell high level. So to me, I'm also kind of an optimist to my own detriment sometimes, but there's a lot happening in the world and it can feel very scary. And it's like, is it trustworthy? Is it not? And just like I said earlier with money or NLP or whatever, there's good and there's the not so good, and it can go either way and people will use it either way. Like it just is, in my perspective, that's my belief. Why don't we focus on the positive and what's to come from it? So as business owners, I think there's just such a massive opportunity right now to, even if you're not going to adopt it like I am and integrate it into the business, to utilize it on some level. And so I think the problem is a lot of people are just ditching everything else and letting AI dictate. So many people have been telling me like, oh, I use it as my therapist. I use it as that. It's writing all my messaging. It is not trained to do that. Plus, it scrapes the internet. So you could easily be using other people's IP and get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Or have it say something on your behalf that I would never say that. That's terrifying, right? And you lose that control. I think, yeah, people go all in that. And maybe you're about to say this too. The other thing I see all the time is they completely put their head in their sand, pretend it doesn't exist, and act like they could just ignore it forever, which is also never going to work.
No, I mean, it's going so quick. It's going faster than they expected it to. The landscape of where we're in now within 5 years, it's just going to be completely different. And I think that is the hard thing is like as humans, we've adapted so slowly over like so long over all the things. I mean, we had horses, like how long ago? I don't know the exact math, but things are just compounding. And so it can feel so crazy. So it's up to everybody. Some people are going all in and creating things. And if that's not you, that's fine. But I definitely would tell people to at least get educated on some level. I founded an actual AI and virtual reality center in the college that I taught at because I've always been a futurist. I was a trend predictor in the corporate ages. And so like as a trend predictor in the corporate days, I don't know what I'm talking about, in the dark ages. Anyways, so I love this stuff. I geek out on it. And so I really think that it's a balance, right? Because on one way, AI is taking over. We have these fake influences that aren't even real people. So I think it's a blend of like, be more human than you ever have, like show your humanity. It's not be vulnerable for vulnerable sake and people that cry on Instagram and stuff. I'm not saying necessarily do that because that's just tacky, but like show your realness, like don't be afraid of that and utilize AI in a smart, effective way. And when you do that, I think we're going to skyrocket. The people who do that are going to skyrocket. The people who like put their head in the sand, unfortunately, it's just like people who like when the computer started and they're like, oh, I'm just not going to use that thing. I'm going to stay old school. Like I went to design school and there was designers that are like, I'm not using the computer. Well, what do you think happened, right? Or like Kodak is a great example. Like they're like, we're not going to go digital. Okay, what happens to Kodak, right? Like we're just at that state, unfortunately.
So I totally agree with all that. That it's an and, not an or. We're gonna have AI and our authentic brand, our legacy brand, a lot of the formats that you described. I think thrive in an age of AI, podcasting, partnerships, human-to-human connection, things that are based on building relationships first. So it's an and technology, AI, and authentic voice and brand and beliefs and values and identity and all that stuff. And so in your estimation and the work that you're actually doing for your business, how, I guess would be the question. And we're going to invite people to a wait list to actually get an insider look into how to do this well. But if you could just describe it for us, how do we create a brand in this sort of new and continuing to emerge age that we're in and heading deeper into?
Yeah. So it is the blend. Like for the past, since I've been in business for 7 years, I've helped people and guided people either like through the process one-on-one and through my group program, which is like modules and the typical business style. And that's still relevant, but people, like I said, they're kind of throwing the baby out the bathwater and just like, I'm just going to ask ChatGPT everything. And then they ended up with this kind of muddled mess. So it's still using tried and true processes, but integrating AI. So I'm actually creating what I'm calling the brand operating system right now, which takes people through my tried and true process with implementation, with the integration of AI. But it's not just Chat GPT. It's like an actual LLM that we're developing on the back end with my process through that. And I think a lot of people who are interested in that are going to go this route because it's just automates things. It helps people get them through faster. And then also as things are progressing, now websites aren't there yet. Like there are some tools where you can like hit a button, makes a website. They're awful. I'm guessing within 5 years we'll be there, and I will be my plan is to be on the forefront of that. But for now, we created a system like that actually intakes everything for the website. So we can create websites that used to take 6 to 8 to 12 weeks, usually held up by the client because they're busy and don't have the time to get me the assets that I need, just to be completely transparent. We developed a system that takes all of that process and we can turn a beautiful website around in about 2 weeks or less. So really just helping automate the processes that can be automated and then not automating the processes that shouldn't be automated and creating what I call a complete brand operating system for people instead of like, oh, I have this here and I have this there, and what I call a Frankenstein brand where it's just all over the place into one place. So that's what we're doing in my business. And I think there's a lot of people that are saying like, oh, get my prompts. And that's great too. Like any way you can integrate it's cool. But I think where people are going to eventually come out on top is if they want to actually building LLMs and systems that are integrated, because anybody can just go to AI and start asking questions. And the thing is to not lose the background and the actual like tried and true processes. And like our websites convert, like we have award-winning websites. Like, yeah, you can push a button and get a website, but is it going to be that quality? No.
Yeah, I think if you over-index for the AI stuff, then you lose context and you lose nuance and quality and that final 5-10% that actually makes all the difference in differentiation. And if you under-index for AI, then it takes you months and way more money, and it's just not quite as good as it could be because you don't have the breadth of knowledge. It's quality and quantity sort of merge. Yeah, our application, we're not, I'd say, as advanced as you and having this new offer that you're rolling out with the Brand OS. But our core program, the Accelerator, which is still a week by week process, we've introduce AI agents to shortcut things and to help people get clearer, faster, or write a pitch that still uses a proven framework and template and approach. Now, anyone could go to ChatGPT and say, be Dustin Riechmann, because I've done a lot of interviews, right? And help me do podcast guesting. It lacks so much context and it's not personalized at all to them. It's not, they don't know the right questions in the right order to even ask things. So insight, context, is sort of this kind of identity that we talked about earlier. It may sound a little squishy or a little soft or whatever, but it's actually the most important stuff. But it matters the most when it's inside of a framework and a process that still works, right? And so that's why I think it's totally an and solution. It's AI and foundational processes and frameworks and human insight, right? So it's Tiffany's insight in it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the benefit of it. Like you have that, but then you're still available on your calls. Same with me. Like I'm always there because people are going to second guess it, or they're going to get multiple options and be like, I don't know which one. And there's still like strategy involved 100%.
Yeah, the strategy work. Yeah, that AI just won't give you in the sense that it's trying to feed you the answer you want to hear. It's not actually challenging you or digging in.
Yeah, it's not going to tell you like you have a mindset block around that you need to get through, and let's get through that. It's going to be like, oh, you're amazing, Dustin. That's the hugest thing.
That's the best question anyone's ever asked me, Dustin. Yeah, but it's also not going to cut you at your knees and bury your dreams or something. But well, this has been amazing. Where should people go from here? So if they're like, hey, I totally know I need more brand, not brand in the soft sense, but the brand in the sense that Tiffany actually helps people with creating a legacy brand. And especially maybe I'm really excited about this idea of an AI augmented process, something that could make this as streamlined as possible. What's the next best place for people that want to go deeper with this work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, number one would definitely be my podcast, just because we're all podcasters here if they just want to follow along and learn more.
And that's your Legacy Brand podcast?
Yep. Same name, exactly. And then if you are looking to brand or rebrand, or you just never really put that brand operating system together, we are starting the waitlist. We're looking at that full system coming out in January. So that's at brandospro.com. And so, yeah, really looking forward to starting that journey, and the website too, yourlegacybrand.com. All of our current offers, we're still going to stick with those. We're still going to do custom work and all of that, keep the agency, but we're just moving along with the times.
I love it. That's really cool. Well, Your Legacy Brand podcast is awesome. I actually do listen to it. I'm soon to be a guest, so maybe by the time this comes out, you can catch my interview with Tiffany on there.
Yes, watch for Dustin's interview for sure.
If that's where you want to start your journey. But Your Legacy Brand podcast is awesome and highly recommend it. And then brandospro.com, that's going to get you on a waiting list. So you're the first to know and the first to be able to get access to this new approach that I fully endorse and think is amazing for technology enhanced branding with the magic of Tiffany Neuman behind it. So it's the best of all worlds. So, well, Tiffany, you're amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I learned a ton. I'm super inspired. You've really reframed me in a really healthy way around the power of brand and all it entails. And so I'm so grateful to have you as a friend and to now have you as an official podcast guest for Seven Figure Leap. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dustin. Really appreciate it. I had such a good time.